Jane Enright, who I feel like is my new best friend. Isn't that a gorgeous photo? I absolutely love that photo of you, Jane. I think it's beautiful. Um, Jane is one of life's people. We've already heard her speak today, so she draws you in with what she's saying. She's had an incredible experience in her life, and she's had to overcome obstacles that would floor, normal people, whatever normal people is. So in order for us to get to know our members better, we give them this slot. Each member gets a chance to do the connect to me. And it's them just going, this is who I am. This is what I love. This is my purpose. This is my passion. This is my mission. And we ask them to give you, as listeners, you being a good audience, a little something to take away, a little nugget of like, what? I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. I'm going to put that in my business. Maybe I'll use that with my kids tomorrow, whatever it is. Hopefully there'll be a little something you can take away and store in your mind and your heart about Jane Enright. And please, please do get in touch with her after this event. So I'm going to highlight this wonderful lady. She's not wearing pink today, honestly. Let's spotlight you for everybody, my darling. And Jane, before you actually start your talk, could you give us like 1 minute of By Collaboration Global and what it means to you? What sort of drew you to the community in the beginning, and how are you finding it so far?
Oh, I love it. I really do. I'm a very expressive person. You can probably see. I'm joining you. I'm Canadian, so I'm time wise. I'm on the West Coast, so it's early in the morning for me. So I got the toothpicks in my eyes, but no, enthusiastic. Thank you for the warm welcome, by the way, Jill. I've had nothing but positives since joining. I came to Collaboration Global via Anne Scotland, who many of you might know, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And again, sometimes it's some of the smallest changes in your life that can make the biggest difference and change your life forever. And Anne and I were supposed to speak at a conference together in Washington. DC, and I ended up, for travel reasons and weather reasons, not being there in person. I was virtual, but she was in the area and she was there. We were supposed to stay at a house at an Airbnb together. And most people would just blow it off and just say, oh, enjoyed your presentation, and we both complimented each other. But no, she took the time to reach out to me and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you had to say, and let's connect. And so that inspired action has now led me to this group and a wonderful sense of belonging. So gratitude, inspiration, and just pure love, pure joy, goodness.
That's wonderful. Thank you, my darling. Over to you now. The floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Well, in terms of slides, I'm going to be very informal. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about myself, who I am and what I do. But I did put in the chat a little bit about what I'm doing, my creations now. I would describe myself as a creator. Can I share screen here, my dear Jill? Can I share screen with people now? Am I allowed to do that?
That shouldn't be a problem. If you hit the
Okay.
bottom, you should be able to do it.
Okay. All right. So in terms of who I am and what I do, I would describe myself as an inspirational, or I've been described as an inspirational creator, author, and speaker. I came by it quite accidentally. Like many of you in the room today, I've gone through a series of life events in my life that just knocked me for six, as you say in the UK, and led me to question, everything in my life, including a most terrible year with three very, very tragic, awful events in succession. I'm gonna touch on them. I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about the bad. I'm going to talk about the good. But I think the phrase that describes me best and why I'm sitting here with you today is: the past is just a chapter, not the whole book. And I really like, Jill, your opening about letting go of labels. We all have things in our life that knock us for six and question, have us question, why me and what's next. And sometimes we don't actually get to do that because our life suddenly changes so rapidly and instantly, like COVID, that some of us, don't make it out the other end. And so, I feel I'm in good company because what I've chosen to do, like most, is tried to look for meaning. Harold, you had a wonderful expression. It's not your fault. When I was going through all these most terrible things, including the first one was getting slammed in the head with a volleyball at a sporting event in 2017, like boom, straight in the face. And I don't mean a little tap. I mean, like, I almost lost my life and I almost lost my speech forever with speech aphasia and word finding issues. you know, I kept, and I had that, and I had, I'm going to tell you, what else happened to me. I felt like I was going to the principal's office all the time. I'm a former educator. I used to teach kindergarten in a remote First Nation community. Put up your hand if you know where Hudson's Bay is, in Canada, or yeah, or Nunavut. Okay, so I was below the tree line, and so we didn't have running water, but we had kindergarten. Okay. And so I come up from a background of being a joyful person and being very grateful because, of course, when you're with children, you're trying to emulate and mentor, what you want them to be and experience. But pretty tough when you get slammed in the head with a volleyball and your whole life changes forever. And I was working as a strategic planner at the time. So I've had a lot of experience helping others in designing employment programs for people at risk, including, children, young, early learners and at-risk youth that have been in trouble with the law and newcomers to Canada. And suddenly I couldn't speak. I couldn't remember what I wanted to say, and I couldn't get my words out. And I would look at, the little magnifying glass, on the computer. And I would look at it, and in my head, it would say, "Oh, that's a mule." And I'd say, my brain would say back, and my little inner voice would say back, "No, Jane, it's not a mule." But I couldn't get the words out. I couldn't find my voice. And that's something that we all take for granted. We all take for granted the smallest things in life. Like we can get up in the morning, we're breathing, and we have our voice, and we have our speaking voice, and we have our writing voice, and we have our creative voice. So that was a huge wake up call. That was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, especially when I was speaking for a living? And I went back to writing because as a child, I always enjoyed writing, but I don't have any formal training as a writer. I never, woke up in the morning, and said, "Oh, I want to be an author, a published author." I read every Nancy Drew book. If you know what Nancy Drew is, I read every Nancy Drew book in the series, and I was an avid reader, but I never imagined myself writing or publishing. But because I couldn't talk, orally the way, verbally the way I wanted to, my speech pathologist at the time said, "Jane, you really need to focus on writing. You really need to focus on getting your ideas out in a different mode. Rest your voice, give your voice a rest, give yourself an opportunity to just really think. And, for goodness sake, use Grammarly and autocorrect, which can be a blessing and a curse. We know when we're texting, sometimes the words don't come out the way they should." So that sort of led me in a different direction. And so you would think that would be enough. I mean, here I was, I'd had these challenges. I was living in Hudson's Bay, teaching before I did that. And, when I arrived, we didn't have any running water, but we had kindergarten, so here I was making, learning how to be resilient in my late 20s, early 30s. And, imagine living in a home in, the early 90s and not having running water. I was exposed to a lot of hardship with Indigenous people in Canada. And I know there's a lot of hardship with Indigenous people around the world. I was I tried to be humorous about it in my own life. I was writing to my family and saying, "Look, I'm making crucial resource management decisions here every day. Am I going to bath the baby? Am I going to take a shower? Am I going to wash the floor? Am I going to make a cup of tea? Am I going to flush the toilet?" I'm telling you these things because these are very real things that happened in my life. But when you get down to Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs, these are things, if you don't have those things in your life in order the way it should be, like your voice or an efficient home or the basic necessities of life, that can throw you off and knock you on your feet. And I've always been a very positive person, but more so now because I've been exposed to a lot of different experiences that most people wouldn't have. So anyway, got out of the Hudson's Bay business, got out of the teaching business, became a strategic planner, was teaching, had this terrible event in my life, teaching others how to run their businesses, got slammed in the head and thought, what the heck am I going to do next? Started to write. And then the second thing happened. And I'm going to read you a passage from Butter Side Up, just to give you an idea. I live with you. First of all, it's chapter 2. The upside of erased is. I live with you. We live together. Yes, we live together. How old are you? I'm 51. How old am I? I tell him that too. Do we sleep together? Yes, we sleep together. He pauses. Do our parents know that we live together, or do we sleep together? Yes, my parents know, but your parents are deceased. Behind those kind, tired, pained eyes is a look of wonder, amazement, and downright astonishment. There is astonishment and amazement on my face, too. First, because this is the most conversation Clayton and I have had since his accident. Now, what are the chances that I would have a life-threatening accident and my partner and fiance at the time would have his own catastrophic brain injury in a car accident and wake up in a hospital saying, everyone's so nice here. I can't remember who anyone is, but you're the nicest and the prettiest. Now, you talk about love. That man could not remember who he was, how we met. Did we sleep together? Did we eat together? Did we live together, let alone becoming engaged? What he did for a living. By the way, he's a very accomplished CEO in his own right and professor of political science. He couldn't remember what a hospital was. And you talk about love. Now, I can get emotional, very emotional about it. But all of those things that led up to that experience, that teaching kindergarten and being resourceful and helping myself and now helping him, led me to this. It led me to write and inspire others about overcoming change. So you can tell I don't take myself too seriously. When I scrolled through the iPhone, imagine having your iPhone, imagine being in that experience. And some of you can, because some of you have parents with dementia, or you're a caregiver for someone, or you've done some volunteering, you've worked with people with disabilities like I have, that their memory isn't intact. Imagine holding up your iPhone and scrolling through the iPhone and saying, well, here's where we live. Here's us. This is the two of us together. Here's our friends. Here's your children. Here's my children. And I was looking for some sort of reaction from him, because I'm sitting at the hospital bed. This is a true story. I'm not embellishing it at all. This is very, very true and real. And I can smile about it at the time because good things have happened. But at the time, it was just like, oh my gosh, like, why is this happening? And he looked at me, he paused, and I was looking for some sort of reaction, some sort of memory. And he said, I live there with you. You live there with me. I must be a lucky son of a bitch. And that's exactly what he said. And, I thought to myself, by the grace of God, like, at least he hasn't lost his sense of humor. He's lost his memory. He's lost every sense of who he is as a person, but he hasn't lost his sense of humor. And there's a story about the red thread. And I believe we talked about feelings. We talked about feeling good. And even though Clayton didn't know who I was, he couldn't remember my face. He couldn't remember my name. He really and truly could not remember living with me or ever meeting me. It was that feeling. It was that feeling. It was that red thread. It was that bond, that intuition that he had. And so that man went on to spend over 100 days in the hospital. And with me being his advocate, because they didn't want to put him into rehab. They didn't want to have him there because he couldn't remember anything. They wanted to write him off. And they said, oh, here's a list of day programs. Here, you have to put him in long-term care. And I just looked at them and I said, no. And chapter 6 was, there's a great Albert Einstein expression, not everything that counts can be counted. How do you measure a person's will to live? How do you do that? How do you quantify that? How do you measure a person's desire to thrive and grow and flourish and be a lifelong learner and move forward? And I went through the experience in the hospital with the textbook. We talk about quantifying things. And Andrew, you were talking about it with money. Well, of course, there's a checklist, about what makes you, a viable candidate for rehab and a great, to move forward, and really, makes a difference between making or breaking your life. And I just looked at him and I said, I gave the presentation of my life. I went back to my PowerPoint skills as a strategic planner, and somewhere in my brain, the filing cabinet clicked on. And I gave the presentation of my life. And I said, here's why you need to let him into rehab. So Butter Side Up is really my journey about how I came to overcome with Clayton, who is and how we drifted off here, there, and everywhere. It wasn't easy, but I've told it with humor and grace. And I said to myself, I've got unique skills here. I've got some lifelong life experience here that I think could be really positive, because all the while I'm looking at people in the intensive care unit and other places who didn't have that advocate. They didn't have that ability to cope with sudden, rapid, unexpected change. So first thing, how can I help you? How can I help you? Acceptance. Sudden, rapid, unexpected change happens to everyone, good and not so good, misfortune and fortune, but it's how you respond to it that matters. And that's not always easy if you don't have those support systems and you don't have that community. So that's why where I learned about the importance of that sense of belonging. My family was far away. Clayton's family was non-existent because they didn't want to deal with what he was dealing with. And that's why I believe organizations such as Collaboration Global, that are based on meaningful relationships, loving relationships, are so important. And that's where I really discovered the power of mindfulness and gratitude. Now, as business leaders, we're all business leaders in our own right. We're all leaders and teachers in our own right. We spend billions of dollars on mindfulness. People, looking for a magic bullet. There is no magic bullet. The magic is really that bigger picture. I call it the OMG, because when we go through trauma in our lives, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting the people around you. And you've all been through it. I've heard some very, very poignant stories here, and people have been very, very kind in sharing their story and very generous. But we're all here because we chose to take those experiences and say, how can I use this? How can I embrace this change rather than fear it and move forward and do something different? And that's what I chose to do. And so I created a company called My Super Awesome Life, which I'm hoping to turn into a foundation. So if anybody has information about that, I'm really excited to learn about that. But I chose to start writing about my journey. And I'm very proud to say that, I've written my book. It's an award-winning book, Butter Side Up. And I've written a second one, Jane's Jam, which is it's just been nominated for Book of the Year in Canada for spirituality, health, and wellness with the Canadian Book Club Awards. And this is from a person. I don't have any formal training as a writer. Yes, I'm a very solid communicator in my own right, but I wasn't thinking and talking clearly, for a while. And it wasn't because I didn't want to. I was very misunderstood. Somebody labeled me as misdiagnosed me. but it was in my head. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. But with speech aphasia, if you've ever had somebody with a stroke in your life, like gone through a stroke or some sort of brain injury, traumatic brain injury, I couldn't get my words out. I couldn't get my words out. So that was, it was about finding my voice through writing and also helping others find their voice after change. And so, in terms of helping, acceptance, I have a little phrase called OMG. And it's not oh my God or oh my goodness or oh my gracious. It's outside in thinking, mindfulness, and gratitude. It's just what we were talking about. It's the bigger picture. And Michael Singer, I read Michael Singer. It was a book that changed my life, The Untethered Soul. Pull the thorn out. You know, outside in thinking or big picture thinking is what we use in business all the time, but we very rarely use it in our personal lives. We very rarely use it in a crisis. I looked to those business skills, that big picture, and looking at what were my strengths and what were my challenges and what were my threats and opportunities. For Clayton, I put it on the back of a hospital menu at midnight, and I said, how am I going to get this guy out of this bed? But I did it with my own life too. And I thought, if I can do it, others can do it too. Outside in thinking really is big picture thinking, keeps us out of the weeds of overthinking. Mindfulness. Mindfulness is the foundation of our lives. It's how we see ourselves and how we see others. And, that's what you're all doing in your businesses, whether it's Nikki, you're a change. We're all change makers. We're speaking, we're writing, we're communicating. And now I write for grownups, but I've chosen to write for children too. So in the chat, I've put a little bit about, hi, I'm Cher, I go everywhere, because one of the beautiful gifts out of this tragedy was that I now have a gorgeous dog named Cher, who I'm going to share there, who's on the beach. And she is just the sweetest little thing. She's snoozy Cher now. I'll show you. She's on the couch because she's having her mid-morning snooze. But she is, I don't know if you can see her here. She's on the couch. She's in the window. But I realized, she's a dog she's trained for hearing alerts. And I said to myself, my goodness, everywhere I go, everyone's fascinated by Cher because she's so mindful. She's very calm. She doesn't bark. She doesn't bite. She doesn't get upset. She's just the calmest, most, unique little creature on this planet. And she's trained for hearing alerts. So that's one of my challenges. I live with a hidden disability, or I don't like to say disability because I just think it's a challenge that I need to live with. But I don't always hear, I either hear too much, like the loudest noise in the room, or sometimes I can't hear the quietest. So Cher's here to sort of help guide me along on my journey and my travels. So I've written a new book, Hi, I'm Cher, I Go Everywhere. A rhyming book. It's Dr. Seuss meets Kobe Yamada.
Sadly, Jane, we can't see the images that you're sharing.
Oh, you can't? I'm paused.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you turned your laptop around so that we could see Cher.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I put them in the chat. But anyway, so I'm here I am. I've gone 365 from acceptance to, acceptance is not you're happy about everything. It's not sugar pops and unicorns and rainbows. It's about, hey, this has happened and what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Yeah. So there's an expression by Peter Drucker, who's an organizational change manager. And I had the opportunity to meet him very early on in my life. I was working with at-risk youth. And I said, Mr. Drucker, if there's one thing you could tell me about change, what would it be? And he looked at me and he said, Jane, nobody likes a change except a wet baby. And so that's what I'm in the change business now, helping people embrace change rather than fear it and overcome. But I'm also very, very interested and focused on children because I'm taking the experience that I learned in Sachico Lake, teaching elementary school, and breaking down those messages into fun, bite-sized rhyming pieces, Dr. Seuss meets Kobe Yamada, and really saying, if we're present and aware, we can make discoveries everywhere, but it's not easy to do. COVID taught us that. That's the upside of COVID. We're all in this together. We all have gone through sudden rapid change. We know know and understand what it feels like, but it's not easy. So it's not just about meditation. It's not just about yoga. It's about a way of life. It's about that purposeful way of life, that purposeful way of thinking. So letting go of the labels. So if I had to leave you with one thing, I would leave you with my OMG, which is the last is gratitude. But also, the average human being, I learned during an interview where I was interviewed for a podcast, Chatter That Matters, is I learned that as human beings, the average human being spends 2.3 billion seconds on Earth. That's the average. Some of us get less, some of us get more. Some of us get a big wake up call, like I did, and probably many of you in the room, to say, how do I want to spend that time? How do I want to spend that time?
Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there, Jane. Thank you so much. Quick round of applause for Jane. What beautiful sentiments, and
Thank you.
An amazing attitude to have around what's happened to you, and having lived through a good friend's daughter having traumatic brain injury, and how long that took to kind of for her to walk again and all the rest of it. It's incredibly, and until you've seen it up close, you cannot imagine what people must be going through. And for you to be this ebullient and this positive at the other end of it all, what a wonderful woman you are. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm in good company, though. This is a wonderful sense of belonging and wonderful sense of community. And I'm very grateful to all of you. I really am. I have those bad days too, but today's a really good day. I'm celebrating because I'm with Collaboration Global. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Listen.